Hey folks, MasakoX here. I would like to point you all to my newly refreshed Patreon at patreon.com/MasakoX, just to make sure the channel can keep on chugging along. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get on to the story. If you're wondering why the screen is red today, well, we're talking about power levels, and that makes people mad, so you'll be turning red probably with this video. Because power levels, we love them, we hate them, we love to hate them. They had been introduced in a really early part of Z as well, and they became really popular amongst the fandom, especially the part that skipped the original run, because apparently nobody watched Dragon Ball. It made us think that this is some sort of an objective system, that it will become a staple of the series and allow us to have everything ordered neatly. But still, Toriyama was a quirky guy, and he had something to say about the matter in this particular interview segment. Why did you come up with the scouter item? The interviewer asks. My number one goal in coming up with it was because if an opponent's strength could be seen as a number, it would be very easy for the readers to understand when I put it in the comic. However, I could foresee that it would be an inconvenience for me down the line, because if you knew an absolute concrete number, then you could tell who would win and who would lose. So, with regards to Goku and company, I decided that their power would change due to ki and couldn't be adequately measured. In addition, it's a very convenient item to create peril, since with enemies equipped with them, their location could become known, and they could be reported. And this is not anything new. We know that power levels are a really touchy subject, and we even touched upon that very quote in our video about scouters. Well, there is a certain meme that has been taking the Dragon Ball part of the internet by the storm, that it could end all storms. And whilst we rarely get into Dragon Ball memes in serious discussions, the whole base Kaba versus Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta debacle, it's sort of given us an idea in revisiting the relative strength of the characters and check out how they apply to one another. Years ago, we discussed the insane power creep of Dragon Ball and how insanely the scale started to increase from the start of Z to the Android saga. But this time, we're going to look at some fun, specific examples. One of the very few official sources of power levels were those movie pamphlets from back in the day, which gave us some idea of certain canon characters if we apply them to the sagas corresponding with their respective movies. Also, Kakarot, the game, does seem to narrow it down a little, and since Toriyama had some influence over said game, we would call this close enough. Especially as it adds up with some of the earlier sources such as Daizenshu, which we do also use to this day. Sure, it may not be the most accurate anymore, it's not aged the best, but it's something. So of course, don't take all this too seriously, it's meant to be silly fun of course. Just like base Kaba versus Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta apparently. And we all know who would have won. Kaba, obviously. So let's start with the last character we have an official power level for. Dragon Ball Super Broly's Paragus, 4200. Pretty respectable, honestly. How respectable? Well, it's that teensy bit stronger than Nappa, 4000, and his Cybermen, 1200. It's obviously much higher than Raditz, 1200, 1500, so about 3 Raditzes, and more than most Namekian warriors, about 3000, not counting No, of course. He isn't, however, stronger than the likes of Muri, 5000, Misakatsun from World's Strongest, 4300, who is slightly stronger, and Trunks era Chaozu, that's about 6000. So yeah, the little vampire could take out Paragus. Wouldn't that be funny? But let's continue with some of those more obscure but fun characters. How strong do you think Kui is when compared to Paragus? Twice as strong? 3 times as strong? Well, over 4 times as strong in fact, a whopping 18,000, which is as powerful as Vegeta was in his own saga. Technically, it's logical considering their rivalry, but you don't think about that every day. This makes him as powerful as Piccolo in Movie 6, and only slightly weaker than Turles' 19,000 before he chomped down on the fruit. But still, much stronger than base Goku in World's Strongest, a peegly little 10,000. Also, depending on a source, it's either slightly below Goldo, 19,000, or significantly stronger, 11,850 or 500. Gold is one of those weird characters, you see, that's really inconsistent between sources. It keeps changing. Where should we place him really? Well, considering that Krillin was over 10,000 in his fight against him, and later capped at around 13,000 during the scuffle against Raccoon, and Gohan fluctuated somewhere between 10 and 20,000 during his Masenko technique, it's quite hard to really pin him down, but it does feel like 19,000 is a little bit too strong for our liking. Although, keep in mind that while the weakest, he's still a member of the Ginyu Force, so all three of those power levels are somewhat credible. To us, 13,500 feels like the safest bet, but then again, it also makes sense that he is stronger than Qui. And while most sources do agree that Raccoon is the strongest of Ginyu's minions, save for Ginyu himself, there is some debate of whether Jace or Berta are stronger, with the bias usually going toward the Brentian. Obviously, there is no question that Ginyu is the strongest member of the team. We do know 120,000 is his number, which is almost twice as much as what many calculations point to Raccoon's power level being. 52 to 71,000. I think maybe he's around 65. But it is time for a game of who do you think is the strongest out of these three, based on official sources. Zarbon, A, B, Dr. Wheelo, or C, Captain Ginyu controlling Goku's body. So I'll give you a moment, so maybe you've got 5 seconds to answer. Exactly 5 seconds. If you chose Dr. Wheelo, you're absolutely right. His power level is an absolutely insane, for the placement of his story, 39,000. With Zarbon around 23,000, some unofficial sources place his monster form at 28, which does sound kind of reasonable, and Ginyu without the Goku manual is tied with him 23,000 kitten, which does put the downgrade that he got by snatching that body into perspective, doesn't it? It was a really big letdown. So okay. We said that we'll focus on the official sources, but what's the interesting difference between an official source and an apocryphal one? Well, in the movie pamphlet for Dead Zone, Garlic Jr.'s power level is said to be 1450. Now, I don't know that you're aware of this, but there was an official Dragon Ball pen and paper role-playing game back in the day called Dragon Ball Z: The Anime Adventure, circa 1999. And this was right before I saw Dragon Ball for the first time. And one of its authors was the Mike Pondsmith, the father of the cyberpunk setting. That's right, a PNP RPG that early? Must have been a lot of fun, right? Well, no. It's been widely criticised by having very badly explained rules and for being easily exploitable. Spiffing Brit would love it. Well, at least it's kind of in the spirit of the series, I suppose, because we're complaining about it being inaccurate. But enough of that tangent. The main thing is that this is the only source that lists Garlic Jr.'s power level in his infamous filler saga. And according to the book 3 edition, it's 1.5 million. 3 million when powered by the Makio Star. That is more than second form Frieza. Heck, that's almost third form. And while the little imp might have been lifting in his pumped up form, imagine, strong, I somehow doubt he got to that level with Frieza. But on the flip side, he had to have at least somewhat of a respectable power level to be able to even match up against our heroes in his own saga, so maybe this isn't all that off, but still. In his original outing, he was supposed to be defeated by a pre-Z Goku and Piccolo, so this is really, really confusing. Also, I think there is a 0 missing out of that with Frieza, as it lists the fourth form as having a power level of 12 million, where in reality, the official measurement is that of 120 million. That is a very weird mistake to make, and a very important one too. But due to the Emperor being a kind of important measuring point, it's kind of downplaying certain characters, and Frieza's later Mecha Frieza, which is only 14 million, such as Super Saiyan Goku's 15 mil instead of 150 mil. But to be fair, the power levels in the anime adventure game do at least seem coherent and make sense in their own internal system in isolation. It's when you compare them against the Daizenshu books that they seem kind of funny. Now, the last but certainly not least tidbit I've got for you, as this whole discussion was sparked by the raw power of Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta going up against Base Kaba, is that Do we have any reliable or dubious sources for GT power levels? Well, it turns out there is one. In November of 2007, Bandai released a little game called Dragon Ball Z Scouter Battle Taikan Kamehameha, Ora to Ome to Scouter. It's basically a rail shooter, first-person fighting game hybrid sort of thing, where you can scan in certain characters from the Vegeta saga in Z, ending all the way in the Shadow Dragon saga of GT. That's a lot. And so far it's the only source of power levels from the GT era. The sad thing about it is that all we've got in terms of this era of Dragon Ball is that. The list is this, courtesy of DB Wikia. So just take this in. So if we assume that Vegeta is around 1.5 billion in Super Saiyan 4, when we add those insane multipliers, the numbers of Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta just go beyond insanity. And that, mind you, wasn't the reality breaker that Blue Gogeta versus Super Broly was, so imagine that in particular. So while I do agree that these two separate timelines should not be judged by the same rules, it's something to write home about, that's for sure. Obviously, Base Kaba would also be able to break reality, but he won't do it. He's just too polite a boy after all. So, there you go. Once again, we can nod at Dragon Ball Z abridged Vegeta and realize that power levels are in fact a lot of bullnookie, but also fun in a way. Super Dragon Ball Heroes likes to play with the idea of putting Super Saiyan Blue against Super Saiyan 4 and giving one or another a very slight edge, just so it seems insanely close, so we don't think at any point it's meant to be treated as some sort of serious measurement. The only difference being some little discrete advantage instead of just simple power scaling, just like most things with power scaling in Dragon Ball really. But anyway, do you have any power level related facts? Are you treating them somehow seriously? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!